Hi, everyone. Happy Monday. Happy day after daylight savings. Hope y'all are doing well, like connecting into to the new reality for some reason. Whew, the spring forward is always so much harder for me than the fall back. Beyond the obvious, like we lose the hour of sleep rather than getting the hour of sleep. But I'm here in New Jersey, super exciting to be working with a bunch of schools while I am here. And I just wanted to call in and sort of connect with folks on something that came up earlier this morning when I was working with the school that I'm here for. And we were talking about conclusions and helping our students draw claims, and even more than just being able to make a claim, like really looking at the evidence in our data and using that evidence to make the claim. So here was the situation that sparked some great conversations with those that I was working with this morning, and I wanted to share out with all of you and like see how it's resonating, see what things are coming up for you all. So the situation was, it was a physics teacher, high school physics teacher, and they were talking about how they were swinging a pendulum and how the students going into the investigation had this really strong prediction, or they were like holding on to it, at least some of them, that the mass of the pendulum would change as it was swinging the room. So they collected the data, different pieces, and they plotted out the data on the visualization, and the mass was stable, one of those common patterns. The mass stayed the same. But what this teacher was sharing was like how interesting / frustrating, because right, let's just be honest, it can be really frustrating, like how strongly his students stuck to, well, no, but the mass obviously is changing. Like, even though the data indicated that the mass had not changed, the students were like really holding on to that. Well, but that's what I thought would happen. And the data, the data do not connect. The data do not support my prediction coming in. But I'm having a really hard time letting go of that prediction, of that previous conception that I had. And it created this great conversation piece for us to think about, because yes, this is the reality. This is the reality for our students. This is the reality for us as adults as well. We really hold on to our mental models, to our understandings, our considerations, our preconceived notions, our predictions about things. And I really like actively call out, like, we do this as adults as well as our learners. So this is a human thing, not just a learner thing, that we hold on to those. And what's really interesting is that, so maybe you're not having your students look at a pendulum going across. And so this particular situation does not resonate with you, but I encourage you to pause and be like, are there times when your students are looking at the data once it has been represented in a visualization, as we're visualizing our data, and it does not actually support their prediction, and this tension, this rub between what they thought they would see and what they're actually seeing? Has that ever come up for you? And does it, like with my students, often result in, therefore, your students coming to the conclusion of like, well, we didn't have enough data, or there's human error in our data, or we did something wrong? For my students, that was like very often like, like actual data values did not match, do not support my prediction, therefore something must be wrong. We don't have enough data. We made an error when we were collecting the data. Something is wrong with the data. That was often the thought pattern that my students would go through. But what's really interesting is, over the last decade or so, there's been a lot, like an increasing body of research showing that, one, we are humans. That actually, this is like decades old research, that we hold on to our preconceived notions. That is just us as humans. That's what we do. But what's really interesting over the last decade or so is this research coming out that when your preconceived notion is at a disconnect, there's this cognitive dissonance between what you expect and what you're actually seeing in the data values. There's some interesting thing that happens for those of us that are comfortable and conversant and really enjoy looking at data and data visualizations. For many of us, looking at data is an interesting, like, oh, we go deeper, we like dive into it more, we get really excited. And so therefore it's very easy for us to be like, just show more data, Just show more visualizations, visual representations, sonic, auditory representations of data, however we're representing it. And that will help people see. That will help people, see where they have a misconception or see where there's a difference between what they predict and reality of this phenomenon. But what's interesting is that's not always how it works out. So when your preconceived notion is attached to your identity, so think of like our students are attached to their identity as whether or not they're science or math people, or their identity of I am in this group and all of us in this group have this sort of preconceived notion about something. When we are presented with data that's in a disconnect from that preconceived notion that's part of our identity, what we see is that many people push back against the data. So that data piece actually does not help broaden our understanding. It actually narrows, and people can sometimes like dive deeper, entrench in that preconceived notion. There are all sorts of implications for this as in society and how adults deal with this. But for our classrooms, I think there's some really interesting opportunities. And this is where our conversation went this morning of a like, oh, so it's not just like if our students are struggling with a piece, if their preconceived notion is different than mechanistically how something works or what the phenomenon actually is, then showing them one visualization will not necessarily shift their preconceived notion. Or it's showing them like, well, they collected the data and they graphed the data, therefore, why aren't they getting it? Yes, I understand that logic, except for the fact that we as humans hold really tightly to our mental models, to our understanding of the world. And this is what we do as educators, is we are broadening that understanding. And so with data, sometimes this comes into a like, ooh, there's some tension here. Like, and so if it's not working once, that's okay. If it's a really important core concept that your students pick up, where are you creating those different opportunities, repetition, iteration, and from different perspectives to help the students think through it, wrestle with that cognitive dissonance, think about what is supporting, what is refuting, what I thought, what pieces can I carry forward, what pieces do I need to adapt? That's how we create a safe space to sort of build on without it turning into, for our learners, a like, oh, well, I'm just stupid. I don't get this. I'm not a science math person. I'm not a data person. And so just sort of a couple sort of wonderings, thoughts that came up this afternoon or this morning that I wanted to share out. How's this going for you? Does this resonate? Do your students struggle with this? Do you have this coming up with your learners? How are you handling it? Share in the comments below. Would love to hear what sort of tips and tricks and strategies are out there that the rest of you have. And if you're experiencing that, know this, you're not alone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Look forward to reading your comments and connecting with you all soon, and have a great week.